Hi, welcome to Straight Talk. I want to welcome all of our new viewers to Straight Talk. If it's the first time you've been watching, what we try to do in Straight Talk is educate you about the issues of addiction and recovery, try to give you tips to help either yourself or someone you care about. And I think we're all in the same boat these days, knowing somebody who's been involved with drugs or alcohol, opiates, and we all want to help, and we're not sure what to do. We try to give you that information. And today, you know, it's kind of an interesting show and looking at the inner workings of a drug treatment center. This way you'll be able to know more of how to find help and get good help for people. And joining me is Gage Theodore, who is the Director of Operations at the Fresh Start Drug Treatment Center, which is right outside Washington, D.C., and provides a lot of great services, which we'll learn about as we go through. But Gage, welcome.
Thank you.
To the
Thank you for having
show.
me.
I appreciate you coming on.
Absolutely.
Now, you are Director of Operations of a treatment center.
Correct.
Okay. But you're also a recovering addict.
Absolutely.
So why don't we start there?
Sure.
And because I think we hear a lot of people in recovery who get into the field, who become counselors and directors, and you know, they've been there.
Absolutely.
And they understand what's going on. Now you're outside D.C. at Fresh Start, but that's where you grew up.
Correct. Gaithersburg.
So tell me a little bit about your story.
Yeah, so I was born in D.C., born in Georgetown Hospital, but I was raised in Gaithersburg, and I grew up there, went to high school there. And you know, at a really early age, I could just kind of tell that I felt a little different than everyone else, even before the substance abuse and the drugs and the alcohol. I really didn't feel okay with who I was as a person. And as I got older and I got into my teens and in high school, I discovered, you know, partying, drinking on the weekends with my buddies and smoking and things of that nature. And that instantly took those negative feelings away from me and replaced them with temporary good feelings. And any, you know, temporary good feelings, they go away, the bad feelings come back. But I knew when I first started using around 13 that's kind of what I wanted to do, because that made me feel good. And I picked that up and I ran with it. And I ran with it for years and years. As the years went on, the severity of the drugs I was doing increased, and so did the consequences. You know, I started experimenting with cocaine and ecstasy and party drugs and things of that nature. And around 18, after I graduated high school, I discovered opiates. It was real big when opiates had first hit the scene, kind of in Gaithersburg, Montgomery County. And that's what I did. And those made you feel really good and then really bad after. And as time progressed, I think by the time I was about 18 and a half, 19, I was an intravenous drug user, shooting heroin on a daily basis. And, you know, the opiates, and especially once I went down that path of using drugs intravenously, it really brought me to my knees. It affected every area of my life, and to the point where I was a shell of a human being, and quite honestly, I just didn't want to live anymore. And you know, luckily I come from a very supportive family, and I bounced around from treatment center to treatment center, and I tried to get help, and I would do really good in treatment, you know, and I would sit there and I would listen and I would participate in group, and then the second I left the treatment center, I was boom, off to the races again. And unfortunately, it was just, I was just signing up for more pain until finally September 19th of 2014, which is my current clean date. I finally surrendered and chose this life in recovery.
What made, congratulations,
Thank you.
first of all. That's a wonderful thing, and your family should be, you know, a special place for them in heaven. What changes, people are watching going, you know, I know somebody's got that same story. They started with drinking, smoking weed, and next thing you know, a couple of years later, they're shooting heroin. So common. What made the difference for you when you were going in and out of treatment centers? As you said, nothing stuck. You tried, but you got out there in that environment. What was different? What did you do differently the time that it really did stick?
I think the main thing that was different was the emotional bottom that I had hit. You know, I was on my way of getting put out of where I was living, but the emotional, I guess, toll it took on me. I mean, I was so beaten that I woke up every morning with tears in my eyes. I wanted to die. I didn't want to live anymore. And I didn't know what else to do, but I knew I couldn't keep doing what I was doing. And I don't know if it was call it a moment of clarity or whatever you want to call it, I picked up the phone and I called my family and asked for help one last time. So I guess to answer your question, what was different this time, I think I had finally had enough. I had finally hit the bottom where I couldn't go anymore.
Now, were you able to go into a residential program or long-term?
I was. So like I said, I called my mom, mama's boy, and she got in contact with some people, and they sent me to a residential treatment center in Florida. And I ended up staying in that treatment center, I think for a total of about 10 months, and I did every level of care they had, all the way from residential to just strict sober living. And honestly, I got there and I did what anybody told me to do. Anybody working there, the counselors, people who had been there before me, because I knew I needed to change. I knew I couldn't keep doing what I was doing, and I was willing to take any and all suggestions. It sounded good. And
I think you really said it right, which is no one knows what makes the difference. You know, you think you reach bottom, you go into a rehab, and it doesn't work.
Yeah.
And then next time you go in, and then one time it works. And I think that's part of this whole problem, which is people feel like maybe treatment doesn't work because they know so many people like you and me who failed, and it doesn't work. Yeah. But in reality, every time, sounds like every time you went, it may be a little bit stuck.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not, I wouldn't say that I didn't take anything with me from all those times in treatment, but I think something just switched in my head, and I knew that I was done. And that's when I really started to listen and absorb the actual information they were giving me.
And so you went into residential treatment, you stayed for almost a year, it sounds like.
Yeah.
And did you get plugged into like a 12-step program?
I did. So I started attending the 12-step program, self-help groups, Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous. And I got a sponsor, and I started hanging out with guys. And I hung out with them every day, and I did whatever they did, because they told me they had been in my shoes, and they looked like they were having a good time, and they were on the other side of the fence. And that's what I wanted. So I kind of found those group of guys, and I stuck in the middle.
So they were having a good time without drugs.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden you're like, wow, that's like another world.
They looked like they were happy, and that happiness was something I had been chasing since I was a kid.
And now you're 5 years later.
5 years later, and I've achieved the happiness.
And you've achieved the happiness, and you're working in the field, and now you're helping others.
Absolutely.
That's a pretty cool story.
Absolutely.
Thank God, right?
Thank God.
I mean, it's crazy. But when we come back, we're going to take a little break. I want you to talk about that 10 months, and the difference, because there's a lot of people, we talk about different kinds of treatment, but I want to talk about that long term. So we're talking with Gage Theodore, who is the Director of Operations at the Fresh Start Drug Treatment Center outside of Washington, D.C., but it's a program that could be anywhere in your neighborhood, and we're going to talk about that also. When we come back, we're going to keep talking with Gage, find out more about how he got help, and hopefully it's going to help you. Stay with us. We're coming right back to Straight Talk.
Who else has been taking your prescriptions? Keep your medicine and your family safe and secure. Mind your meds. To learn how we can help, visit the Partnership for Drug-Free Kids at drugfree.org.
It's a short ride from your neighborhood to your naturehood. Find fun activities to do, like boating and biking, or camping and hiking, plus much more. To find a neighborhood park or green space near you, visit Discover the Forest.
Who else has been taking your prescriptions? Keep your medicine and your family safe and secure. Mind your meds. To learn how we can help, visit the Partnership for Drug-Free Kids at drugfree.org.
Hi, welcome back to Straight Talk. We're talking with Gage Theodore, who is the Director of Operations at the Fresh Start Treatment Center outside of Washington, D.C. We're hearing a lot about Gage's personal story of addiction and recovery. And I think that's important to hear for anyone out there, that there is hope. You can be a terrible person on drugs, but there's redemption. You can get well. You can get on that right road, and Gage did that. And thanks for hanging in there.
Absolutely.
Gage, we really appreciate you telling your story. You mentioned that you finally went to a program in Florida that was 10 months, long-term.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there's a lot of different treatments out there, and I'm sure at Fresh Start you provide all kinds of different treatments.
Right.
Does the longer someone stay in treatment better? Do you have a better chance for success, do you think?
I think so, absolutely.
Yeah?
Yeah, so in my case, staying there for the amount of time I did, nearly a year, I honestly think that made all the difference in my long-term success. At the very least, you get more time of sobriety under your belt, at the very least. But usually what happens is as time goes on, your brain starts to heal, and you start to pick up things that you may have missed those first couple months in treatment. And you start to, actually hear what those counselors and group facilitators are saying, and you start to build that foundation, and the stronger the foundation is you build an early recovery, the more longevity your recovery will have.
So that length of time, I also thought about and think about returning back to the same old environment.
Mm-hmm.
When we talk about relapse, we talk about recidivism for prisons. When you have somebody in a controlled setting, 10 months, you felt safe.
Yeah.
And when is it time to go back where you can handle it? How
Right.
long does that have to be? I personally think it has to be a lot longer than 28 days.
Yeah. So the 28-day or 30-day kind of treatment model, what that does is it gives the individual a break. It gives them a break from reality, if that's what you want to call it. A 30-day break from the drugs, but your brain takes so much longer to start to heal. Staying in treatment for an extended period of time, like I did, I was able to experience the inpatient, the residential part, and then a step down to intensive outpatient, where I had a little bit more freedom, but I was still held accountable and I was still connected to the center. And then as the months went on, you drop down to a lower level of care. So rather than being in a facility for 28 to 30 days and then just kind of re-released out into the world, I was able to, that transition phase is very important. It was important for me, and I believe it was important for everyone. That transition phase where you get a little taste of reality in the real world, but you still come back to the center and you're held accountable. A lot of clients get into intensive outpatient and they're able to go work and get jobs and feel productive and like a normal person, but at the same time they're being held accountable by the center. And that transition phase is what the big reason why I was successful.
Yeah. It's a shame we don't have more long-term programs, but we don't. And what do you offer, like a Fresh Start? What kind of programs do they offer?
So
there?
at Fresh Start, our highest level of care is partial hospitalization, and really that just mimics an inpatient. So we have.
What does that mean?
We have several houses in the area, 4 to be exact, and 2 of them are partial hospitalization. So it mimics an inpatient setting in the sense that they're 24-hour supervision. They don't have their cell phones. They don't really have too much connection with the outside world without supervision, and that's how it mimics the inpatient. That could be anywhere from 2 weeks to 3 months. It's kind of on a case by case, whatever that.
So they're really under control of, say,
Absolutely.
Fresh Start.
Absolutely.
Where you know where they are, where they don't run off.
Yep.
And they're in a house, but then they come to Fresh Start for treatment.
Correct.
So you really have them for the 24 hours a day.
Absolutely.
It's just they're not living in the same building.
Correct.
Is that right?
Yep. So they live in the houses. We transport them back and forth to the center, and they're in groups usually from about 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. Intense groups, long groups. And then with our lower level of care, we have intensive outpatient, which is the step down. You move to a new house where there isn't necessarily 24-hour supervision, but there is staff supervision. That is when the client is able to go out and find a job and go to meetings and meet people. They're responsible for paying their own rent, things like that. Small things like getting a job, paying rent, they can not only help them be accountable, but build self-esteem and help them feel like they're being productive members of society.
So you get to say the 3 months into the partial hospitalization, which is kind of like the inpatient. Then they step down to the intensive outpatient. So you're building this time of recovery.
Absolutely. Yeah,
as
through all
time
levels
goes
of care.
on. So yeah, you're looking at that longer model.
Absolutely. And then even after the intensive outpatient, we have a just straight outpatient, where instead of coming to our center anywhere from 5 to 3 times a week, you would maybe just come once a week and do an individual session with your counselor. And that way, you're still held accountable. You still have those resources that our center provides, but you're in just sober living, so you have more freedom, and you're able to. It's kind of seeing that whole continuum of care. It ensures a smooth transition for clients who go kind of from the highest level of care to the lowest level of care.
And again, it sounds like it's taking the place of a residential.
Absolutely.
Which is very expensive. I would imagine that this is cheaper than residential. And I don't know how the state of insurance is or Medicaid these days when it comes to paying, but it's got to be a barrier.
For sure.
For a lot of people who are looking for help.
Yes.
One, is there a long-term program? And two is, how do we pay for it?
Right, right, yeah.
And you see that at Fresh Start, I'm sure, all the time.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, we get clients from all different financial backgrounds, all different walks of life, and we try to help everyone we can.
Yeah, yeah. You wish there were more out there that could do it. Now, when they get out of the intensive outpatient, and that's what, evenings, day, or how?
So we have a daytime track and we have an evening track. We like everyone to start with the daytime track because they're kind of stepping down from total supervision to kind of half supervision, if that's what you want to call it. So we'd like to have them all there during the day. However, we do get a handful of clients that already are employed, and once they're done with the partial hospitalization, they go back to their jobs so they can provide for their families and pay bills. So we have an evening track for that as well.
Okay, and that goes on. There's
throughout
any
the week.
limit? You just.
So our intensive outpatient is anywhere usually from 6 to 8 weeks, but again, it's all case by case. We see shorter stays, we see longer. We kind of tailor the length of stay to the client's needs.
When you look at that long term, and you look at being able to stay there, and have that, as you said earlier, a safe place where you're not using, gets you ready.
Absolutely.
That does get you ready. We're talking with Gage Theodore. He's sharing his own story. He's also sharing the fact that he's Director of Operations at Fresh Start Recovery Centers. I think we've put it up there a couple times for you to know how to get in touch with them. We'll also give you a number at the end of the show if you need help of where to go get help. But I appreciate, stay one more segment.
Absolutely.
Finish out this show and help share your story.
Sure.
We really appreciate it. When we come back, we're going to continue talking with Gage, find out about, again, the best way to get somebody help. That's what it's about. Stay with us. We're talking to Gage Theodore, and we'll be right back to Straight Talk.
You talk to... In every family, small conversations can make a big impact. I grew up on tour with my parents. Kind of different, but we bonded over music just like other families do over sports, camping, or other interests. And we talked. Little everyday conversations from silly to serious that built a foundation over time. Honest conversations, like when my dad shared his experiences as an alcoholic.
Your honesty about that part of your life gave me a sense of integrity that I wanted to uphold in my own life. And I was so grateful that you and Mom had become these sober, stable people who were always there for me.
I wanted you to know, from someone who's been in recovery more than 30 years now, that hard work is what creates success, not alcohol or other drugs, whether it's music or anything else. I said it a lot, and I'm glad you took it to heart.
Talk, they hear you. For more information about talking with your kids about underage use of alcohol and other drugs, visit underagedrinking.samhsa.gov.
Most party fouls are pretty dumb. But if you decide to drink and drive underage, you could lose your license and your freedom. Underage drinking and driving. The ultimate party foul.
There's one thing you can never have sex without.
It's not something you buy,
or something you take.
In fact, there's only one way to get it.
It has to be given to you, freely.
It's consent.
Because sex without it isn't sex.
It's rape. Consent.
If you don't get it, you don't get it.
It's on us to stop sexual assault.
Learn how and take the pledge at itsonus.org.
Hi, welcome back to Straight Talk. We're spending this whole show, and I'm glad we're doing it, finding out about addiction, about recovery, what is helpful, and hearing it from a person who's been there and is now helping others. Gage Theodore is a recovering addict, clean 5 years, congratulations.
Thank you.
And is Director of Operations at the Fresh Start Recovery Center in Gaithersburg, Maryland, right outside Washington, D.C., and provides a great service for people and is sharing it with us. And thank you for doing that.
Sure.
We talked about the length of time, trying to make it as long as possible for people, that there's no quick fix. You know, there's a lot of medications out there now. I ran into one recently where you can just get the medication and no counseling.
Right.
And I said, well, you've got to have that other part. And they go, oh no, we can, you know, we recommend it.
Mm-hmm.
But it wasn't part of the program. There's
Right.
a lot of medications out there being promoted on TV and all this. But you mentioned earlier about the value of 12-step and what that is. And I think people are kind of getting away from that because it's a big commitment.
Right.
It's a lifetime commitment. But just talk about the importance without getting all into the 12-step, but the importance of that.
Yeah, so I think a lot of people see, you know, advertisements for those medications, or they talk to medical professionals and they see those medications and they see a glimmer of hope of a quick fix for their problem. And unfortunately, that's just not the reality of it. You know, addiction and substance abuse disorder is something that people have for life, from start to finish. And like you said, some of the medications work, some of them are great. I'm indifferent, to be honest. But if we don't, you know, treat the underlying issues and kind of what's really going on with the person or what's really going on with myself, my chance of success is very little. And you know, you mentioned the 12-step programs, whether it's Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, whatever it is, any kind of self-help group. For me, those are so important because I'm able to surround myself with other people who have felt the exact way I felt when I was at my lowest point in my life. They know where I've been, they've felt those feelings, and like I said earlier on, they're on the other side of that now, and they've been through it, and they can guide me through it. And you know, I get a little time under my belt, and I'm able to guide someone else through it. And that fellowship and that camaraderie that you build in those fellowships and those self-help groups, they're life-saving. They're absolutely life-saving.
And they're everywhere.
Everywhere.
And you know what? They're free.
They are. They are.
I always tell the people, I say, you know, AA, NA, it's free.
It is.
It's free. You don't have to pay anything.
All you have to do is show up.
And there's meetings everywhere, and it's free. It's free. As I keep yelling, it's free.
Yeah.
But as you say that, you know, I think a lot of people worry about, you know, that it's a religion because, you know, higher power and all.
Right.
But, you know, people can take out of it what they want.
Right.
Right? I mean, they can.
Yeah.
But the bigger point is what you said, having that fellowship of people who were supporting you in sobriety. And I'm convinced that the majority of people that relapse, the majority of people who go back to prison do it because they go back to the same environment, and they run into the old buddies, the old cronies, and you know, if a guy's using, they don't want to see their friend get clean. We all know that. We've all been, and I think it. But you find that to be so powerful for you.
Absolutely. Yeah, I got in with a group of guys that, like I said, were from all over, but although we're all from all different walks of life and all different areas, we've all dealt with the same thing. We're all dealing with the same thing. You know, those fellowships, there's no rules. There's guidelines and there's principles and there's people before you that have done it that'll show you the right way. But you can kind of pick and choose what you don't like. Like you had mentioned, you know, the religion thing or the higher power, or calling your higher power God. The great thing is if that turns you off, you don't want to do that, you don't have to do that. You don't have to say those things. You can essentially tailor it to your needs. You know, there's the steps are in order, and there's guidelines to follow, but at the end of the day, you have to do, you know, what you're most comfortable with. And the best part is, odds are there's someone else in the room that feels the same way you do.
Yeah. I mean, it must be successful because now we have Gamblers Anonymous, Overeaters Anonymous. I mean, and they all follow the same basic concept. So it must be a good way to live.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with it.
Yeah.
But it's a supportive. But also, like, as you say, just the family work, family, you know, that it's a process.
Yeah. You know, I'm a firm believer that people cannot sustain long-term recovery on their own. And I say that from my own experience. I couldn't do it. I tried for years to do it on my own. And it wasn't until, you know, I got into a self-help group and I leaned on my closest friends and my family, the people that loved me, for support. And together we've done it. You know, I'm the addict and I'm the one who's staying clean, but I wouldn't be able to do it without them. We all do it together. And that's the same thing that you'll find in those self-help groups, those 12-step help groups. We're doing it together.
Now you're on the other side at Fresh Start. How does that feel, to be on this side of the business in helping people?
It's great. It's great. You know, for a long time, even in early recovery, I didn't really know what I wanted to do, and I didn't know what my purpose was, or really why I was still here. And now that I've found that purpose and I found a passion, and, you know, being able to come to work every day. You know, when our clients come in, most of the time they're at the lowest point in their life. You know, they are at the lowest point in their life, and we're able to see them come through the doors like that and see that transition over, whether it's 30, 60, 90, 6 months, however long it is. We're able to see that transition, and you can kind of see the person come in with their head hanging, and by the time they leave, their head's up high, and most of the time there's a smile on their face.
Well, you've done it the right way. And I congratulate you. 5 years. Gage Theodore, the Director of Operations at Fresh Start Treatment Centers, and I wanted him to tell his story for everyone out there to know that there is hope, that people fall into addiction, but they also can recover. Gage is a great example. I also want to let all of you know, watching Straight Talk is very exciting. You can now watch Straight Talk on a website. It's AmetysRecoveryCenters.com, and you just hit the link to Straight Talk. You'll see all of our shows. Gage will be on there within days, and you'll be able to share it with your friends. If you're a teacher, you can use it in the classroom. If you're a family, you can watch it together. But all these shows that we do for a reason, to educate you, the public, about addiction, and also show you there's hope in recovery. So please utilize that. You can also on that website access treatment or other services that will help you. So I want to thank Gage. I want to let everyone know that help is available. I want to thank you for watching Straight Talk, and we'll see you next time.